the Stronger Economies Together webinar. So all 4 phases have been invited. And with that, the purpose of this webinar is to hear well, I have a couple of these. This is the first one, to hear from a Phase 1 team. And in this case, Sharon Gulick will talk about what they've done to build upon the first phase, our first effort here. The next webinar will be in August. I know originally I said July, but we've had the scheduling conflicts. And then with that, I'm going to turn it over and welcome everyone. And I'm thankful that Sharon and Brian Fogel are joining us. And with that, I'll turn it over to Sharon, who was part of our Phase 1 training team. And we learned a lot from her and others' experiences. And then from there, Sharon and Brian will take it over. Thank you.
Thanks, Suzette. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sharon Gulick with University of Missouri Extension. With me today is Brian Fogel. Brian is the Executive Vice President of the Community Foundation of the Ozarks. We're going to spend a little bit of time today talking to you about kind of where we took the SET program in Missouri. As Suzette said, we were a Phase 1 state, and we've kind of continued to do the SET type of engagement, but through our partnership with Community Foundation of the Ozarks, we kind of took it a little bit of a different path. And so we're going to walk you through, give you a little information on both of our organizations, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what we're doing. So I'm going to turn this over to Brian so that he can introduce the Community Foundation.
Thanks, Sharon. It's a privilege to be with you all, and we very much appreciate the partnership we've had going back now several years with the Strengthening Our Communities. Our mission is to improve the quality of life for all citizens in the Ozarks. And we are one of about 730 community foundations in the country. We are a regional community foundation. We're 41 years old, and we've had affiliates now for about 20 years, and we cover 58 counties in southern Missouri, everything south of the Missouri River, and have a total of 45 separate community affiliates that fall under our umbrella. 45% of our some 257 million in assets come in the rural or represented by the rural Ozarks, and we have a team that's dedicated to our affiliates. We work hard in rural communities to look at what can we do to improve the quality of life there. So we have done some great and I think innovative partnerships in education and in the arts. But we look at communities, how can we have more of an impact there? And one of the things that we believe in is the need for a community plan. And that was sort of the genesis of strengthening our community. So when we were having this discussion, I've known Sharon and her work for many years, and so we had a discussion of what could we do in partnership with Extension and USDA to help these communities have a comprehensive plan for their community that include engagement of the citizens, and again, how can they have a goal to be better and a vision to be better. So that was the purpose of working with SET and with Sharon and her great group. Because we know that smaller communities, rural communities that have a vision and a well thought out plan with a lot of input from the community itself will do better than those who don't. We selected initially for 2 communities. One was a much smaller community, and Sharon can tell you about that implementation. One was a larger community, and we've sort of had a mixed result from both those communities. The smaller community it continues today. It's going very, very well. It's certainly had an impact. They believe in the model. Now 2 years later, they continue to meet, and it's had an impact. The other community was a larger community, had just suffered through a traumatic tornado, and they tried to do it regionally, and it didn't work quite so well there. And I know Sharon can talk better about both those experiences. But the reason we went with SOC was it was a proven planning model, had been tested earlier. What we like about it is that it involves the entire community. Our experience in smaller rural Ozarks is that they even though they're small and they probably all eat together and go to church together, there's some significant silos that they're not working together. The schools probably don't talk as much to the aldermen as they need to, and the chamber maybe is working in isolation. And we try to come up with ways to make them and encourage them to work more collaboratively and involve and listen to the entire community, and that's what this process does. It is staff driven. There's a professional staff there who understand small communities, and I think that's critical and key, that they understand both the strengths and weaknesses of smaller communities. So it is very much staff driven, but it is community led, and the communities that again are working and are have taken ownership of that have done better. And it also takes a community that is willing to leadership that's willing to surrender control, because they may hear some things from the citizens that they may not agree with or may not like, but that's what makes this work. So that's why we went with the SET model and started strengthening our communities and committed some resources to it.
Thanks, Brian. I'm going to take just a couple of minutes to talk about Exceed. I know that the participants don't have microphones, but I do want to point out that listening in are some folks like my husband John, I see his name on here, Richard Proffer. I don't think Dean is on, but John and Richard were part of our SET team. I also see, Kenny Sharon's on here from North Dakota. Kenny was a PhD student with me and worked on this. We've also got Bonnie Townsend's on from one of our newest projects, so we may be able to get them engaged in the chat here when we get through the presentation. The Exceed program. It's University of Missouri Extension's Community, Economic, and Entrepreneurial Development Program. And the conceptual idea behind Exceed is to work with rural communities, and it's rural not necessarily by intent, but that's kind of how it's worked out, that almost all of the places that we work with fall under that classification of rural. Focusing on things like entrepreneurship, place-based economic development, really thinking through planning, and then connecting them to the resources both at the university and through our key partners. So again, behind that is this idea that to have a vibrant rural economy, you need to have the awareness of what your assets are, and that entrepreneurship, kind of in its many different iterations, is really going to be the foundation for that kind of development in a community. What kind of brought us to this whole approach, both through SET and now through SOC, was this recognition that we're really seeing rural communities that are struggling to figure out where they fit in today's economy. That old model of economic development that so many of them still look towards, that industrial recruitment model, just isn't working for them, but they really aren't sure where else they need to go. There's a trend towards regional, and you're probably going to question that when we start talking about our projects. You're going to see most of them are not regional. That's one of the things I think we're struggling with a little bit. For a lot of them, when we work with them, they may come to us as a single community, and for them to agree to work across a county, they see that as regional. we're making some inroads in that area to get them to kind of see that they really need to work through a multi-county approach. While Missouri, as from the economic development perspective in the state, is very strong in regions. There's a lot of regional activity in the state. We're still struggling a little bit to get some of our rural communities to really understand the value of that. And then linked with that is really the need to help educate our public officials around what is economic development today, what are some new approaches. We have a collateral but separate workshop that we do for local elected officials, community volunteers, kind of around those fundamentals of economic development. What's really going on out there today? And then, so common issues that we see, and I'm sure any of you that work in communities, all these things are things that I'm sure you see on a regular basis. You know, I'll point out that, and you can't see my cursor. That's right. Rosa said I got to do something else here. But that, come here. Leadership really is probably the key issue, and that concept behind leadership capacity was really what brought us together with Community Foundation of the Ozarks, because they had a real interest in that whole area of building capacity within a community. So let me get rid of this thing. I don't know how to get rid of it. So where did it all begin? Well, as Suzette said at the beginning, Missouri was one of the original set states, and we had 2 regional projects that Brian kind of briefly alluded to. But as we moved through this, there were some issues within the set approach that some of the communities struggled with a little bit. About that same time, Community Foundation of the Ozarks kind of came to us and said, we're thinking about this whole community capacity issue. Where can we work together on this? And CFO was very interested in branding a product, and that's kind of why we call it Strengthening Our Communities, because they wanted to, since they were providing the financial support for this, they got that right, and we felt that it was appropriate to kind of get a separate name for it, since we were kind of expanding a little bit beyond maybe the set framework in some ways. So, strengthening our communities. It's, again, just like SET, it's an intensive community engagement model. It primarily focuses on those rural communities. Now, there's a big difference between SLC and SET. So, working with individual communities for the most part. Typical engagement tends to be in the 18 to 36 months. That's within the one meeting with them monthly. Then after that, there can be multiple months. We've got some of our earlier Exceed projects. We're moving into our 7th or 8th year of engagement with them. So once we're there, we're there and we're with them. Brian, did you have anything you wanted to add before I kind of get into describing the projects?
Well, it was I think you hit it well we had a 3-year project here called the Ozarks Empowerment Project, and that was the whole purpose of that initiative, was to build capacity with our communities and with our nonprofits. So this was part of a bigger initiative to build capacity, and what we saw, again, as you mentioned, is leadership, civic leadership, civic capacity was lacking in many communities. The will was there, the know-how may not have been.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the projects. So this map kind of represents the community engagements that Exceed has been involved with for about the last 7 or 8 years. The green colored regions are ones that were involved in tourism or local foods. So you've got a region up here. This was pretty much tourism. This group all along here, this is actually 4. There's a little problem with the map. This is actually a region and this is a region. Are ones that are involved in tourism and local foods. The orange are those that are the SOC projects. So I'm going to kind of walk through them fairly quickly, just kind of describe what's going on there. This group right here, Barton County, Jasper, and Newton, this is where Joplin is. So those of you that that ought to ring a bell with you. This is the area that had the devastating tornado. Um, they and this county here, Ripley, were our first two projects that we engaged with through SOC. This The Joplin Regional Partnership Group was going to focus on. Now you can't see my cursor, can you? So I guess I'm pointing away here, and you guys can't see anything. So this is the Joplin Regional Partnership right here. If I can get this thing to work with me. Um, they wanted to focus on the concept of youth retention, but from a pretty narrow descriptor for young adults, kind of in that 25 to 35-ish age range. It was a good concept. That particular project didn't pan out real well, and I think there's probably lots of reasons for it. I think part of it probably was they were still distracted in many ways by the tornado recovery. But one of the important things we learned in that project, and what was quite interesting, Joplin itself is it's located between the two, so it kind of sits right here, kind of on the border between these two counties. And it tends to, in some ways, from an economic perspective, kind of overshadows the region. But the city of Joplin itself never really got that engaged with the project. And again, I think it had a lot to do with the tornado. But in the rural areas, particularly in this county, Barton County, to the north, they were highly engaged, and they were really interested in this concept of how they can get those young professionals to move into the area and stay. The problem, I think, with it was leadership. And this was a real important learning lesson for us, that you have to have a strong leadership that embraces the project, because in this particular case it was embraced by the group of people that submitted the application, but I'm not sure that was ever completely translated out to the rest of the participants. They put together some pretty good ideas, but they were never quite able to really bring those to fruition. Ripley County over here was the other first community. This was an equally interesting project, and I think that John and Richard would probably agree with me that when we started this, of the two, we assumed that the outcome was going to be completely the opposite. Ripley County kind of lies down in the southern Ozarks. This is the area where there's a lot of national forest land here, fairly isolated, a little bit of a difficult area to get to. There's also a very, very long history in this part of the state of not a lot of cooperation. There's some real challenges in getting folks to work together. Our first meeting there, this is a county, it's probably the total population of the county is probably about 5,000 or 6,000. We had about 35 or 40 people at the first meeting, which was really encouraging, but what we quickly found out was that city government and county government didn't speak with each other. The communities within the county didn't communicate. Organizations within the cities didn't cooperate. There was really a huge amount of development that was going to have to go on down there. Their goal was economic development. We asked them initially that they would consider regional, and we wanted them to kind of consider this area here plus a couple of counties down in Arkansas. They didn't want to know anything about that. They only really wanted to do the single city in the county. Had a lot of debate about it, decided to go ahead with it anyway. The first year was pretty rough. There was just a lot of that interpersonal, interagency things that we had to overcome down there. And they set some pretty lofty goals for themselves. At the end of a year, they came to us and they said, we need to take this thing county-wide. At the end of 18 months, they said, we really ought to be thinking about this as a regional project. They've continued to meet monthly for it'll be 3 years this fall. Are making great strides in their project goals, and are just it's really a gratifying project to watch what's going on down there. The groups are all working together now. There's lots of cooperation. Some of the long-held animosities have been set aside. They've done a great downtown project. They're very close to getting a dentist to move into the county. They are really doing a great job. We also took on a couple of other projects. We took on, normally this goes through an application project. We took on this county and a little town here in very southwestern Jasper County without going through the application process. That was something else I think that we learned a little bit, that you need to go through the application process even if somebody pops up that looks like a good opportunity. Both of those are struggling. Both of them have the same challenge. They can't get people to attend the meetings. We're lucky if we get 2 or 3 people at a meeting. Their circumstances are very different. The city here, small town located about a mile off of Interstate 44, has lots of development opportunities. Just having a little trouble, I think, focusing exactly where they want to go with it. This county is an interesting county. High poverty. The state median household income in Missouri is about $54,000. In this county, it's just barely above $19,000. About 65% of the land mass is owned and controlled by the federal government, either through the National Forest or the Ozark Scenic Riverways. This one, there's again, this is kind of a challenging area to work in, and we're just struggling to get people to come to meetings. One of the outcomes I'm hoping that we get out of this, which would be exciting, is the development of a community foundation that would serve the county, and that would be a great outcome for them. We have 2 brand new projects. One is here in Gasconade County, again working with a single community, but we've only met with them 3 times, and at the last meeting they've already expanded it to include the entire southern part of the county, and they've got some pretty specific activities they're going to undertake, and I think they're going to be pretty successful. And then Henry County, which Bonnie Townsend's on the call today. This is a county-wide project. We're working across the county with all of the communities in the county on economic development. We've gone through the initial asset mapping and planning, setting out some goals, and their initial things are going to focus on tourism development. There's a large Corps of Engineers lake located in the county, and they have a lot of traffic that's moving there between Kansas City, Springfield, and Branson. And then the other issue that came up among the communities was the issue of communication across communities. That there's a lot of things that are going on from the perspective of development, access to grants, different things, but individual communities don't necessarily know what the other communities are doing. And so they've got the other team that's going to be working on communications, putting together a website that'll serve both internal communications, and then will also assist the tourism committee in communications about tourism opportunities within the county. Again, both of these are really new. We've only been engaging with them for just about 3 or 4 months. But I'm real optimistic about these 2 projects. I think they're going to have some really great outcomes. Brian, did you want to add anything on that?
Sharon, I would just add, Joplin, these are self-selecting communities, so they come to us and they say, we want to do this, we've got everybody on board, and as we learned, that doesn't mean everybody's on board. So we even had some concern up front with Joplin, for instance, that they were distracted, certainly and understandably, by the recovery effort, and were they really ready to take this on? They said they were, but again, the leadership of the biggest community, Joplin, I think there was a benefit to the smaller communities, but Joplin, who was supposed to be the lead, really never did embrace it. We're delighted with our experience in Ripley County and what that's done. I happened to be down there just in the area last week, and they continue to move forward. It has done, there's some awkwardness in any community planning process, that there is the forming, there's the forming, the storming, and it took about a year to get through the storming before they were norming and now performing. So again, I would have been with you, Sharon. I would have guessed maybe they would have been the total opposite of success. I thought Joplin would have been successful and Ripley would have struggled. It turned out to be different, and each community, as we know, has its own personality and culture, and in those cases, one's been very successful, the other not so much. The newer ones, we think, will be successful. They were very, very eager to be a part of this, and we look forward, but again, probably too soon to see right now.
So just kind of quickly reiterating a few things we've talked about. The goals are really is that building capacity for leadership, economic development, and strategic planning. And I will tell you that within strategic planning, this is probably one area that we vary a lot from the SET model. We've embraced a process called strategic doing that we utilize within our planning. It's very fast-paced, very targeted. It is not your traditional strategic planning approach with vision and mission and setting out goals and all of that. It's very different. It's a planning process developed by Ed Morrison at Purdue that it was initially designed to work within an economic development, primarily innovation type of situations. We have found that it does work in other applications, and for our communities, this seems to move them toward action pretty quickly. We do a lot of linking with resources. We see that as one of our primary things that we can bring to the communities, is that in a lot of cases the communities know that there's things out there, but they just don't know how to get to them or quite how to embrace them. And another outcome of this is hopefully the development of local foundations, and of course supporting the ones that are already there. So how does it work? It's pretty simple. Community Foundation of the Ozarks promotes the opportunity once a year to their member affiliates. There's an application that they complete. Whoa, what happened here? I lost my restore. Boop, there, okay. Sorry, my screen went blank. There is an application that's required. It is reviewed by both the Community Foundation of the Ozarks and Exceed, but the final selection really is done by the foundation. And we contract with CFO to provide about 15 to 18 months of engagement and training with each of the projects. The model that we use within the community is they have to form that local team that's going to lead the project, and we probably the first couple meetings meet only with that team that's going to be leading it, to kind of make sure we understand where they're going, they understand what we're going to offer, everybody kind of understands how this process is going to work. We do a pretty intensive asset mapping. We use the community capitals as is the typical framework that we use. And as Bonnie Townsend from Henry County, who's on the call today, will attest, that small county went through that process and they identified 659 assets that they had within the county to work with. That actually became a little bit of a nightmare for my grad students, who had to put that into some sort of a manageable matrix that we could use. But it's turned out well, and I think that if they can identify that many assets, then we've got some real opportunity there. It's very place-based. It's very much focused on what do you have, what can you develop, what's within the county. We aren't going to worry and think about what industry we can attract. We're going to focus on what we have and what we can build around that. The action plan has metrics and accountability. We tie very tightly to that is how do you define success for those actions? And then accountability. Who's going to do it by when? One of the things within strategic doing that's a little different is we take about a 30 to 60 day window on all activities. So we might have a major project like the communications committee, for example, in Henry County. One of the things that they're going to be doing is a website. Well, we made them take that apart. Well, what are the things that have to happen in the next 30 days to make that work? Who's going to do that? So we keep it moving, and then we can adjust and change course of actions very quickly along the way if we need to. And of course, ongoing research, training, whatever's needed. This kind of partnership requires mutual awareness and respect, and that's both between the funder, CFO, and University of Missouri Extension as the contractor, but also between us and the communities. There has to be some common goals, a willingness to risk and fail, and you've heard us say a couple of those projects maybe didn't quite pan out the way we thought they were going to, but CFO has stuck with us on this, and sharing the results. That's one of the things. And share here, I mean something, I don't mean so much as we give a report to CFO, but we're willing to allow CFO to take credit if they want it, allow the communities to take full credit, and we're willing to take a step back. I think that's important that that you're really willing to share in this situation, and with
Sure.
that comes taking responsibility.
These are some lessons learned of our
Brian, you want to talk a
20-somewhat
little bit
work
about
in
what you've
rural
learned?
communities, and those who have, as Sharon mentioned, in Shannon County, if we can get some philanthropic work going there, I think they will be better for it. I think too often small communities look outside for their help and for their resources, and they're looking to our state capital or to Washington, D.C., when really the cavalry probably isn't coming. And if they're going to make their community viable, it's going to be left up to them with their own local assets, and that's the business we're in at Community Foundation, is developing local assets. One thing we're doing right now is talking about the resource that is out there on transfer of wealth, and we probably made 60 or 70 presentations throughout the Ozarks that it's a county by county approach to show them what that transfer of wealth from one generation to the other is going to mean in the next 10 years, the next 50 years, and if they can capture part of that for charitable needs, the difference that will make. Certainly why we engaged with Sharon and her group is that we know those with a plan and a vision will outperform those who have none. And we have seen a scarcity of leadership development, which is critical to the future. In bigger communities, we have a leadership development program that's now in its 30th year here in Springfield, and many folks have gone through that. It's very competitive to try and get in, and we're again building the capacities, the leadership skills, and the relationships, but that isn't happening in smaller communities, and we think a city or county and town by town approach will help immensely building those skills and that capacity. Again, too often I think we're not encouraging our leaders to ask the right questions. I think they're so worried if they're an elected official or a head of a civic organization, they're worried more about the answers, and this process really encourages folks to ask the right questions and to not be scared to do that. And again, that's giving up some control and presenting some vulnerabilities, I guess, but I think it's okay to say we don't know, let's find out together. And again, one of the great things about Ripley County is that why it's been successful is there's been a lot of talking, but there's been a lot of listening. And I think when you're willing to sit down and listen and understand, you're going to be better for it. So often our citizens get, I think, disengaged and disconnected because they don't feel like they have a voice. And I think this process certainly gives them a voice where they feel like they can be heard.
I think from the Exceed perspective, what we've learned is it's hard. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. It is hard, and you have to recognize that going in. Again, as Brian said, that local leadership is essential. If you don't have a champion there within the community, then the project really it's unlikely to succeed. And what's interesting for us, and again, we haven't quite done enough of them yet to maybe make this as an absolute statement, but what we're starting to see in at least in two of the projects that it's the unexpected leader that steps forward. Down in Ripley County, for example, the person that's really the dynamo behind it that's getting that one moving is a local insurance agent. Over in Gasconade County, it's somebody that works for a state agency, and this is completely outside of his normal scope of work. But these are folks that really have that ability to bring together people, and they really can reach out in the community and find those individuals who maybe wouldn't normally step up and get involved. Planning has to be the foundation. I think that's one of the challenges that a lot of communities have is they get an idea and they jump on it and they get out there and they do it, and they really haven't thought it through. They haven't put any goals in place. They don't really understand what it is they want, why they want to do what they think they want to do. And so planning really has to be at the foundation. For those of us that are on the provider side of the fence, it's hard sometimes to not do things for them. I've sat through an awful lot of very long meetings letting folks kind of struggle through the process so that they can come to a conclusion, and just sitting on your hands trying to avoid coming up with a solution for them. There's a real tendency, I think, for us to do things for them. And that, I think, reinforces what Brian was talking about is, all of us have been in these projects where, they start asking, well, what can they do for us? Or won't so-and-so do this? Or can't we get that? And, we usually start these off by telling folks, they aren't coming. That we're on our own in this thing. We've got to carve our own path for the future. If we've got a good plan, we can demonstrate capacity, then we can probably get some of that external financing or the external assistance. But if we're going to wait for somebody from outside to come and fix this problem for us, it's just not going to happen. And probably equally important is to realize that you're not always going to be successful. That there's lots of reasons why a project might not come together. There's nothing wrong with saying, this isn't working. Can we redo it? Can we start over, or do we just need to both agree that we just need to walk away? Because you can't always be successful, and it's not fair to the community or frankly to your organization to continue to struggle with a community that either isn't ready or isn't willing to take the steps that need to be taken. That really is what we wanted to present. I don't know if Brian, if you have anything else that you wanted to add. Otherwise, I think we're probably going to take questions. Brian, let me explain to them what they need to do, and then you can make some comments. For those of you that are not familiar with this, if you look over on the left-hand side, kind of at the bottom, there's a little thing that says chat. And there's a
you
box
know,
here, and you can just
our
type your
grant
questions in
making
there,
and
and we'll
our
answer
work
those
in
questions.
again,
Yeah,
our
Brian,
rural
go ahead.
communities has really been more around social services, arts, education, more traditional grant making opportunities for a community foundation. What we've realized from this work is you can have a great school system, but if you don't have economic vitality, your community is not going to succeed or not going to be viable. So we're having that discussion right now within our board and within our organization is, do we need to get more involved in the economic development side of things? And I won't speak for our board. We're having taking some time to discuss that, but I would think that that's probably a direction we're heading. Again, we're here to improve the quality of life of all citizens, and certainly economic viability is part of quality of life, a huge contributor to quality of life, and keeping our children there with opportunities. So I suspect one of the learnings we've had from this is that we need to get more involved on the economic development side and not just leave that up to local chambers of commerce and government. So I think that's where we're heading next.
Okay, some questions. Lynn wants me to explain strategic doing versus strategic planning. Wow, that's a whole webinar. In a very simplistic description, if you think about traditional strategic planning, and if you think about kind of a continuum, we plan, and then we go along for whatever that period of time is that plan might be, 18, 24, 36 months. We get to the end of it and we say, that worked, or well, that didn't work. With strategic doing, the idea behind that is that we set a goal. So we create a framing question. So, I've got Henry County on their mind because I'm working on their report. But you set a framing question. What would it look like if Henry County had a dynamic, highly successful economic development strategy? So they go through that process. They come up with what are the things we could do? Might come up with a dozen, might come up with 100. What could we do? We rank those. We pick 3 things that we should do. All the coulds don't get thrown away, but we focus on some shoulds, take those shoulds apart into their individual characteristics, metrics, measurements, and then the difference comes in is that 30-30. So we plan for 30 days, we come together, we talk about what's happened, what have we learned, we plan for the next. So you can see the difference. We don't just move along this continuum for 18, 24, 36 months. We're on a much shorter time frame. So for example, we might say, we want to achieve project X. So, let me use Henry County again. One of the things they want to do is they're going to put a website together. So they're going to go out and they're going to do some investigation on that. Well, I can tell you one of the things that's going to come back immediately is we don't have very good broadband in this county, and a lot of our folks can't access it. All right? So rather than going through the whole process of building out a full website and relying on that as our only mode of communication, if they come back and find that's true, then they can do a course adjustment at 30 or 60 days into the project to figure out how are they going to work around that issue, rather than investing a lot of money for me over 2 years into a particular project. And again, this is also a great way to get individuals who maybe say, I cannot and will not commit to a 24 months. I can't do it. But I'll bet you I can talk them into making one phone call in the next 30 days and coming back to a meeting and report to me what they learned. At that point, I've probably got them hooked. That's real simplistic. It's not really doing justice to either strategic planning or strategic doing. But if you want more information, Lynn, just give me a call or drop me an email, and I'll try and explain it to you. Lisa, hey Lisa Franklin, is there a level of investment? that the community or the county has to make? Yes and no. Right now, the way this process works, Community Foundation of the Ozarks is providing us a modest amount of money on for a group of projects that we work with. And that primarily covers our travel and associated costs with the engagement. The community or the county is responsible for local logistics, meeting space, a meal if they have the meeting over the time where a meal would be appropriate, communications across the community, advertising and engagement. As we move forward with this project, we probably will be looking at that a little bit to maybe rethink that a little bit, because what we have, and I think we all know this, that we all value what we pay for something, and that having some resources from the community invested
No, I think
in
you
the
covered it well.
in the
Yeah.
project is probably a good thing. We're just not quite sure how that might turn out. Brian, you got any thoughts on that? Okay. Daryl wants to know about asset mapping. This is a process. This was actually something that John and Richard that are on the call, and then Dean Larkin, who I don't think joined us, kind of came up with when we were kind of struggling through this whole thing of how do you do some of this asset mapping and kind of on an interactive basis. And what they came up with was using community capitals, which hopefully everybody's kind of familiar with the concept of community capitals. It's Flora and Flora's work, identifying things like human, environmental, financial, built, social, etc., capitals that are present in a community. And what we do is we take large sheets of paper and we put them up around the room with each of the capitals identified on it, and we go through a little bit of training so people kind of understand what they are. And then depending on the group, if it's a multi-community or a multi-county group, then we have them break up into that geography. And if you can pull it off, it's great if you can get a separate color of post-it note for each of the geographies so you can kind of see who's identifying what. And then they each have about 5 minutes to work through each capital, identifying assets and getting them up on the board. Then we go around as a group, we look at them, we can add more things. If somebody thinks of something that somebody in another county didn't think of, they can put it up there. It's highly interactive, and what I personally like about it is it gets the people up out of their chairs, moving around. I haven't done this yet, that I haven't seen communities really get into it. Now I will say that the Gasconade County group that we're working with, they struggle with this a little bit, but I think once we kind of got them into it, it worked really well.
Yeah, and Sharon, I would just add to that. I think one of the
amazing
benefits of
array
that,
of
so
assets, and it
often
works
in
really
communities, they focus on what they don't have,
See, I want to make sure we got so
and
many
they
questions. I
lament
don't wanna
that. And I
skip any
think
of them here.
focusing on what they do have, and again, they have resources locally, helps them focus a little bit better where they're not thinking about all the things they wish they had that they don't.
Thank you, Brian. That's another really important point that I failed to mention. This is all grounded, strategic doing, our asset mapping is all grounded in the concept of appreciative inquiry, which really means we don't talk about what went wrong, we talk about what went right. So even if they want to talk about something, we're talking about, well, what went right in that. We want to stay on the positive. If you let a community get into hanging crepe paper, you're going to get lost in the weeds there, and you're never going to get back out of it, and it really becomes a problem. Lynn, thanks. Can you recommend a resource I assume for strategic doing? Yeah, Lynn, if you contact me, I can. It's a little complicated on the whole strategic doing piece because it is a trademarked approach through Purdue University, but there is some, oh, there, Jeff got the strategic doing guide. He found it out there. Great. Thanks, Jeff. Valerie, you cited someone, economic development professor regarding strategic doing. Okay, that was Ed Morrison. He is on faculty at Purdue. The link that Jeff shared will get a lot of that information.
Well, as I've
Brian,
learned
I
in
think
this
this is a
field, I've
question
been
for
in
you.
it about
Suzette is
5.5
asking
years, and
if
if you've
someone
seen
wanted to
one
engage
community
a community
foundation, you've
foundation, how
seen
would
one
you
community
engage them for this
foundation.
type
They're
of
all
project?
very different. They have different areas of focus, and so I think it really depends on the region, the community. We all are there to create philanthropic and charitable assets. I think sometimes we have to encourage our community foundations to think a little more broadly and comprehensively of what that means. And we do that with our affiliates. We try to say, we're more than just grant makers. We want to be transformative to communities, and we talk a lot about leadership and the role we can play there as we call it, even-handed conveners. So I think it's just finding out who covers your area, which community that is, and I would tell you I would be happy to visit. We do share a lot of information among the community foundations in the country. About 85% of America is covered by a community foundation. So odds are there probably is one in your area, but not all, not 100% coverage. But if you want to contact me directly and have a conversation with the leadership of that local community foundation. I just think it's approaching them with, if they're not seeing how they could benefit that community. Sometimes grants are more than just dollars. It can be for services like this. So what we're doing in this particular program is just creative grant making more than just dollars to an organization. Sure. I would just close by saying I think, we talk about our small communities having silos, and then oftentimes we're guilty of that same thing. So I think the closer we can work together with other agencies who are serving communities, such as the USDA, we've got a great partnership with them here in Missouri, and they help fund our transfer of wealth study. The better we can develop, we can deliver services more seamlessly, the better the community is going to be as well. So I think by working together, we can help with community viability. It's been a privilege to be with you all, and Sharon, thanks for asking, and thanks for the great partnership.